Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I don't need to tell you that life gets hard. Life gets hard, really hard. But God's faithfulness is still active and alive in our hard. And these episodes are dedicated to remembering and claiming the promises of a faithful God. I'm your host, Angie Bauman. I'm a pastor and Bible teacher, founder of Steady On Ministries, and creator of the Step-by-Step Bible Study Method. But more than that, I'm a trauma and abuse survivor who carried a heavy weight of shame and worthlessness for many years. And I still struggle, but I live in much more freedom now because I know God through His Word and speak truth to the lies of the enemy with His Word. And that's what we do here. On Mondays, we take it in by studying the promises of God. And on Wednesdays, we live it out with teaching and testimony on the promises of God. So thank you for tuning in, my friend. You are the reason for this show. And I'm so very, very glad you are here. Let's get started. Hi, friend, and welcome to an episode on the stresses and triumphs of being a caregiver. My guest today is women's ministry leader and Bible teacher, Deborah Smith. I'm not really in a caregiving season right now. I have been, I know it well, but Matt and I have both children and parents who are healthy and independent, a fact we are exceedingly grateful for, and they don't need much support from us to do daily tasks. But my dearest friends, Lisa and Maria, whose voices are frequently heard here, are each in a caregiving season. Lisa's parents both have health issues, and Lisa lives far away from them. Maria's grandmother is in a memory care facility, and Maria is the nearest relative. Both of these women face the daily challenges and decisions of caregiving, and I see up close how it affects their lives. Our verse this week is James 1:3. In the ICB, it says, "You know that these things are testing your faith, and this will give you patience." You'll hear Deborah talk about things she gave up to care for her parents, but you'll also hear her boldly proclaim that she needed this season as much as her parents needed her. She found gifts in her giving. My friends are finding gifts in their giving. And whatever form your giving takes, however that giving is testing your faith, I hope you are finding the gifts in it too. Let's listen in. Welcome, friend, into this Live It Out episode. I'm Angie Bauman, and with me today is Deborah Smith. Deborah, welcome to the Steady On community.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be with you today.
I am too. I'm excited to have you. I don't think this is something we've ever talked about here, about the idea of caregiving and what that does to a spirit, to a soul, to a body, to all of that. I have a couple of friends who are in that right now, and I see the toll that it takes on them. I know how much we talk about it when we're in conversation. It's something that they are dealing with all the time, kind of in the thick of it, if you will. So will you just kind of tell us a little bit about your experience with caregiving? What has happened in your life, or what did happen in your life that made this a ministry focus for you?
Thank you. Thank you. You're right. It's not something that's talked about enough. It's definitely not something that's talked about enough in the church. Millions of people are caregiving every day. And so we know it's affecting many Christians. And so I'm happy to share my experience with it. I ended up losing a job in 2013 at a law firm. And providentially, it was the same year that my mother, one of the strongest, beautiful, godliest women that I knew, she was diagnosed with dementia. So it was that same year, and I ended up moving in with her, and that began a process that I had no idea what this trial was going to look like. I didn't even realize it was a trial until I got in it. And so yeah, she was diagnosed in 2013. I moved in with her, and for the first couple of years, it was probably the hardest season because she did not realize. She kind of knew something was going on, but there was this constant resistance to really accepting what was going on. And so it was this fight within herself. And so trying to care for someone who needs care, but doesn't think they need care, that season was the hardest. So it was a few years of just, honestly, Angie, just watching my mother slowly deteriorate. Her memory, her short-term memory started to deteriorate. Her motor skills started to, she started to lose a lot of the ability to do small things. Like she would cook, she'd leave the stove on. If she put the keys in the door, she'd forget to take them out. So it was that period for a year or so. And then something just switched. And it went from that stage of dementia to the stage where she could not be left alone at all. She could not really bathe herself. If she went to the bathroom, she'd make a big mess. And so that was a very difficult stage. And then it ended up, to where she had no idea that she even had dementia, which honestly is in a lot of ways the hardest stage to watch, but the easiest stage to take care of. So from 2013 till 2017, I lived with my mother. I took care of her. As I said, the steady decline meant that my level of care started to increase for her. And I'm watching this woman really turn into someone that's helpless and completely dependent on me. What I did not know is that my father was struggling so bad with, they weren't married, my parents were divorced. And what I did not know is my dad's health was as bad as it was. And so in 2017, 4 years into my mom's dementia, at the height where she had gotten to the point where she didn't realize she had dementia anymore, he had a massive stroke. And he ended up in a nursing home. And let me just say, I'm the only girl from my parents, my mother and my father. I was raised with three brothers. Two of them were in California at the time. One of them was living in the DC area with me. And so as the only girl, it literally was just it was my calling. It was no question in my mind that I was supposed to be caring for my mom. In fact, I was a part of a church plant in 2015. We were planning a church in Philadelphia. And I thought I had been with mom for a few years. She has three other children. Maybe it's someone else's turn to step in so I can go and serve this church. And 10 months into that process, the Lord just stopped me in my tracks. Like, you're not going to Philadelphia to do ministry. You've got ministry right here. You're not going to take your mom out of her house and send her to California. And so I had to abandon that work and focus on the ministry that was right in front of me. But when my dad had his massive stroke, again, as the Christian of those children, so my dad and had another daughter and a son. So I have a sister and a brother who are 20 years younger than me. And but they're not believers. And so the long story short is I ended up being primary caretaker for both of them. And yeah, I would go to the nursing home in the morning. We ended up having to move my mom out of her house. Let me just say that 4 years in, we ended up having to move her because the level of care that she needed at that point, as much as I loved her, I wasn't equipped to give it to her. So we moved her into this beautiful personal care home where it's like a big family. But the thing about caregiving is even when you put your loved one in a facility, Angie, they're taking care of her, but I was still responsible for her care. I was responsible to make sure they were taking care of her the way they should, that we were paying for what we were getting, what we were paying for, that she had visitors, that she was, everything they were supposed to do, I had to make sure they did it. So I was constantly there every day. I was visiting them both, making sure they had what they needed. And so that's kind of how I ended up spending 7 years taking care of both of my parents. My mom passed away in 2020 in my home. Dementia, I mean, we have been praying for years for the Lord to take her home. And not to let her get to the point where she can't walk. Don't let her get to the point where she can't eat or swallow. And the Lord did not do that. And so at the end of her life, she could not swallow. And Angie, I remember kissing her on her forehead as I'm holding her hand as she's taking her last breath. And I'm holding her hand. I'm telling her, you're going to be with Jesus any minute now, Mom. And so Dad died in 2019, 8 months before her. So as I'm talking about it, it's really quite amazing what God did in that 7 years as my dad passed away and my mom passed away 8 months later. And yeah, that 7 year period with him walking through what is probably the hardest thing that I had to walk through. So that's a bit of it.
Yeah, Deborah, thank you so much for letting us just kind of see the specifics of your caregiving story. We really appreciate your vulnerability around that. And I heard several things I just kind of want to comment on. And that is, I hear that job loss in 2013, which must have been something that you grieved. It sounds like it was surprising, something that was I'm sure there were feelings around that.
Mhm.
Even giving up the ministry work in, I think you said in Philadelphia, is that right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was something that you must have invested a lot in, that you gave a lot to. The decision to put your mom in care after you'd been her caregiver, that had to. There's just a lot of like loss and I just feel it. I feel it
Mm,
on
mm.
that journey, the things that you're dealing with, and also just watching your mom decline. I'm sure that was really challenging. I just want, like, what are some of the feelings that you would say that I think I know some of the things that I would be feeling as I, walked that long journey. It's a long goodbye. I've heard people say that about
Mhm,
dementia. Now
mhm.
that's a long goodbye, but what were some of the things maybe that you wrestled with, or questions that you had for the Lord as you dealt with that caregiving role?
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I did not have a lot of questions for the Lord, right? Because of the way He saves me, and the relationship that I've had with Him these 23 years. And so when He called me to not go to Philly but to take care of them, I was clear that that was his call for my life. And I was clear that if this is what the Lord wants me to do, this is where I'm going to be, have the joy and the peace and the contentment that I need, is going to be walking in His will. So I didn't really have a lot of questions for Him about why, Lord, and how long, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did find myself doing is just becoming more and more needy, Angie, because this is the type of work that you have to have the Lord to do it, because you have to be able to try to manage all of your natural feelings. Like you said, I'm watching my mom decline, and I'm combing her hair, and I'm cutting up her fruit, and we're dancing, and then one day she can't walk, and so the Lord proved to be faithful. And so I got to see that in a way that I probably would not have seen in any other trial. But I felt lonely. A lot of times I felt lonely. A lot of things come out when you're caregiving with family. My mom had 7 siblings, and I had siblings, and I got some help. But when people are sick and when this is happening, other people have to deal with their own fears, their own regrets, their own guilt. And often that is projected onto the one who is doing the very thing that no one else is willing to do. So I had to manage the relationships with my family. I had to manage feeling abandoned a lot of times when I couldn't get the help. When people had the luxury to say, I can't take her today, I can't pick her up today. I knew that I didn't have that luxury. So I had to manage that. I had to continually be forgiving people. I had to continually ask the Lord to remind me that these are light, momentary afflictions. That these current sufferings aren't worthy being compared to the glory that's going to be revealed, and that keep my eyes fixed on the reward.
Mm-hmm.
That there's going to be a day when I'm going to see Him face to face, and I want to be looking forward to hearing, "Well done, good and faithful servant." So I was just wrestling with my own natural flesh. I was trusting the Lord. I was asking Him to help me be faithful, and to encourage my soul. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all kinds of feelings. But what I did not experience was fear. I did not experience doubt, and I did not experience anxiety. I think there was some stress, but there wasn't a moment where I felt abandoned by the Lord at all.
I love hearing that.
I'm
And do
just
you
saying, I'm not trying to
No,
sound
I love hearing
distant. I'm just
that,
kidding.
because I think I love what you said about even being pulled away from that ministry plant that you were talking about, that I didn't have. I knew that if I did what he was asking me to do, that's where the joy would be. That's where the peace would be, even if it seemed like this was the more attractive option, maybe even,
Mm-hmm.
but doing what he's called me to do is actually the thing that will bring me what it is my heart longs for, and that is close
I like the
connection
way
with
you just
him,
said it.
right?
Oh yeah, I like the way
Yeah.
you just said it. I have to remember that. And
Yeah.
that's right. And I learned that a long time ago. And it's accepting that makes it not easier, but I guess maybe a little easier to walk in what He's called you to do, even when there's something seemingly more attractive. understanding that he knows what's best for us. He knows
Yes.
the beginning from the end, and no good thing will he withhold from those who
Yes.
walk uprightly. He just won't do it. And
Yes.
so it's really believing and trusting him. And trials are going to find out if you do that. That's what
Yeah.
they're sent to do, to test
Yeah.
your faith.
I was going to ask you, but I think I want to maybe even partly answer this question, because I was going to ask you what kind of God's character is on display during caregiving, and I want to point to what you were saying about the relationships, because man, I think that you've hit on something really important there, because I think we do deal with our fear, our mortality, it's almost like I think sometimes people don't want to get close to the person who's ill because they're afraid they can't get away. Then I don't want to be sucked in the way you've been sucked in. And so maybe I just can't take her today, or whatever the case may be. And there is the forgiveness.
Mm.
Man, I think that would be a huge thing, especially if relationships are already strained. But I wonder if you would talk about both of those things, like what kind of characteristics of God did you see that were able to be on display through your caregiving, or did you witness? And also, how did you handle that? Or what encouragement do you have for us who might need to be handling that caregiving calling when relationships are less than ideal, which so many are, right?
Yeah, and you said something. Even if they're not strained before the
It'll
person
bring out the straining.
listen, it's going to test
Sure,
everybody, and you're going to
absolutely.
really realize where you are. And so that was, I mean, people that I love, my siblings, my aunts, my uncles, I know they loved her, they loved me, but they were not either equipped to do what it is that I was doing. And instead of saying that, oftentimes was gossiped about. I was sinned against with words. And but here's the thing. Uh, God's faithfulness was the main thing that I saw. I saw him able to draw near to me when I would feel like there's no one willing to even inconvenience themselves so that I can take a break. I saw him draw near to me. I saw him meet all of my needs. I saw him keep his promises. And so I took a 10-day vacation, Angie, and people from my church every day visited my dad and my mom, who were across town. I was able to go away for 10 days, and my church students. So I saw him
Wow.
use his people to meet needs. I saw his faithfulness, his deep love for my mother, right? And even for my father. My father was not a believer, my mother was. The fifth commandment is one of the things that drives us to care for our parents. But yeah, and with the relationships, what I had to keep reminding myself is forgiving people forgive. I know that you're hurt. I know that they have just got on a conference call and gossiped about you without even talking to you. But there's nothing that they've done to you, a sinner, that's anything near what you've done to God, who is holy. And you forgive because you've been forgiven. And that's what I had to keep telling myself. And the Lord honored that. I'd have my weeping would endure for a night, and then joy would come in the morning. So I watched him keep all of his promises. I watched his word come alive in my life in this particular season. And what is the result of that is like I don't worry. I
Mm.
don't I don't worry about anything. I don't doubt him at all. I walk by faith and not by sight. And so he just made himself real big in my life. And I saw him as God, the Almighty God that can do everything, who's called me to this, and he's going to make sure that I get through it. And he's going to comfort me, and he's going to send me help that I need. It may not come from where I want it, because it hurts when it doesn't come from the place you want it, but I'm going to give you what you need. And he just magnified himself in my life. And it had to be that way.
Well, I could feel the tears behind my eyes when you were talking about like him meeting your need and knowing that people might have been talking about you or criticizing. When you're giving so much, I can just feel this in my spirit. When you're giving so much and sacrificing so much, and yet your care or the way you're caring or the decisions you're making are being criticized. And yet I believe the peace, and that I feel the stillness almost in your voice when you said, but I didn't need to worry and stress myself about that, because the Lord was meeting my need and he had given me enough that the overflow of what he could give me in terms of forgiveness and grace and love could be then shared with people that didn't even know they needed it from me, but they did. Right.
Right.
And yeah, and I just,
Yep.
yeah, I appreciate that so much. Love that.
And I thank you for the way you just kind of unfolded that. And it's true. It really was a bit of a lot of criticism. That's
Yeah.
probably the best word. And you know, I thought about the way Jesus was treated. Like he intends to conform us to the image of the Son, right? So I just kept going back to his word. I kept staying tethered to the word, and all of my answers, all of the solutions, all of the things I needed to pray for, what I needed to be clear about was in the word. And so I had to stay tethered to it, and it was enough, and it sanctified me. Jesus prayed, sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. And
Mhm.
so that's what happened.
It
Because he
was
was
enough.
working on me. It
Yes, yes, it was enough. The word, it was enough. I
was
love that,
enough.
Deborah, so much. Yeah. He was working on you. Talk to me about that. What are some things you learned about yourself or some places that God grew you during this season?
Yeah, I don't think I ever really knew how to love people.
Ha!
You know what I mean?
Well,
Because
maybe not like this, right?
not
Wow.
like this,
Yeah.
because we're talking about people who cannot return it in like kind, right? They can't reciprocate. And so I think about the way the Lord loved me while I was yet a sinner. He died for me. And what he's given me, I can't give him. And so I learned that. I learned what true love is. I learned what that I did not that I was weak, that I was really weaker than I thought. I thought I was strong and resourceful and all these things. And but for this particular trial, I realized it just made me needier, and my weaknesses were on display. And so I identified with the Apostle Paul when he said, God's strength is made perfect in weakness. And so I'll boast in them. So I realized how weak I was. And I honestly kept praying, like, Lord, just keep me weak then. Because I need your strength to be on display. So I learned that about myself. I learned that my heart is just wicked, Angie. Like the things that I would think and the things that were in my heart, I would have to constantly ask the Lord to purify it. Like you don't have to say it out of your mouth. If I'm thinking, God, I hate these people, right? It doesn't matter if you say it. The Lord knows what you're thinking. He knows our heart. And so
And it plants seeds, whether we say it or not,
you
right?
better
Yeah.
come on. Yes, yes.
Mm.
And they will grow if they're not plucked out, if
Yep.
those thoughts are not taken captive, anything that is not of God. And so I learned that about myself. Like, you are such a sinner. Oh my goodness. Just in my thoughts and just that how much I needed the Lord.
Mm.
And you know what else I learned about him is how much he loves me
Mm.
and how he is everything that he says he is, and how he could have found anyone in a number of ways to care for my beautiful mother and my father. But honestly, he allowed me to do it, and he strengthened me and equipped me to do it. And so I learned that, yeah, I was chosen for this, and I was privileged to do it. And if I had to do it all over again, I would I don't even know. I would throw myself into it 1,000 times more because of what I gained,
Wow. Yeah.
storing up treasure in heaven.
Uh, It's beautiful. Listening to you talk about it is just beautiful. And I think that I love what you said about I didn't know how much I needed him, or maybe I wasn't in touch with how much I needed him. I feel like the strongest woman that we can be, the strongest women that I know, people that I know, are people who are so in touch with their desperate need for Jesus, right? I
Yes,
just when we know we don't have it, but we don't need to have it because he has it aplenty, that's when we're strong because we're
yes,
not worried about what we lack. And when I am the worst version of myself, it's because I'm all caught up in what I know I lack. And I'm forgetting it doesn't matter what I lack. I mean, we always need to be growing. Don't get me wrong, growing and
right,
strengthening and getting better and all of that. And I'm all for that. But ultimately, he doesn't design us to do this on our own. And he doesn't give us what we can handle. He gives us he invites us to participate in the kind of seasons and journeys and trials that help us become more and more aware of our need for him and his faithfulness at the same time.
yes. That was beautiful. Yes. And isn't that the ideal position for a Christian to be in?
Yes.
Is
As
there
much as
a
we
better place
resist
to
it, yes, it is.
but we're so crazy because we fight it. It's like a kid that's exhausted, but he won't
Won't
go to
lay
bed.
down. I know.
Child.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the ideal place to be, and he's going to get you there
Yeah. Yeah.
one way or the other. And so yeah, um,
Yeah. You're a couple years out from this now, from this season. So I just want to ask before I let you go, what is God's faithfulness looking like in your life right now?
yeah, it's so sweet. Yeah, a couple years out, I was able. He's so kind and he loves us. In 2021, so mom passed in 2020, and then I took kind of the summer and we buried her and sent her home. And then and when 2021 came, I was like, what am I doing? Because I'm single and I don't have children, and it's like, what am I doing? And like, you could go to Philadelphia now if you wanted to, because the
Oh,
church was planted. I had been dipping up there a couple, several times a year to worship with my friends and enjoy what God had done. And I was going to conferences and just like speaking and just doing all these things with the church. But I wasn't a member there. I was a member of a really faithful church here in the DC area, which I loved. God was kind to give me the ability to plant with another church right here in the city with the same type of ministry. Isn't he good like that?
yes.
And so 2021 came and I moved to Philadelphia in April of 2021. And I joined that church and they was like, damn. So I finally was able to go there and join and serve and work for a Christian organization while I was there. And I spent 17 months there. And so he's faithful that he carried me through what he called me to, and then he gave me the desires of my heart, and he blessed me to do that. And so I'm back in the DC area though, because I feel like he has need of me once again. My sister is 20 years younger than me. I told you my dad remarried, and so she's 38 and I'll be 58 in a few months. And so they have 3 children now, but when she got pregnant with the third baby, she just needed some help. And so I wanted to come back and serve my sister and my brother-in-law. And I didn't want to miss my nephews growing up. Like at this stage at the fourth quarter, I'm in the fourth quarter. I probably don't have 57 left. I don't even know if I want to be here 57 more because it's crazy. But I wanted to be home. I wanted to take my nephews to school. I wanted to play with them. And so at the end of 2022, I moved back to this area and I'm staying with my sister and brother-in-law for a few months while I help them take care of the baby girl that God blessed us with. And I don't know what's going to happen next, but he's been faithful to allow me to still have joy in whatever season I'm in, wherever he's called me. He's walking with me. He's ordering my steps. I get to talk to women like you about him. I get to teach women the Bible. I get to play with my nephews. People love me. I get to love people. He has not changed his character at all. He's just continued to be faithful and kind to me, and I love him so much.
Wow. I just love the way that you are. It's so evident that you are tender to the Lord's leading. And I just love that. That's an example for me today. It really is to not to try to work always to hold my plans loosely, to submit them to the Lord and to really trust that he is going to take me in the best direction. So thank you for just being a testimony to that today, Deborah. We really appreciate that.
Oh, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, and
Yeah,
thank you
yeah,
again for
yeah,
having me. It's just a joy to talk about the what the Lord has done and his goodness, and I hope that it's encouraging. And yeah,
yeah.
I
I know
feel
it
free.
is. Yeah, yeah. So friend Deborah can be found at sowtoharvest.com, and that will be linked. Other places you can find and follow her will be linked in today's show notes. Anywhere in particular you want to send the friends?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Sow to Harvest. You can follow me on Facebook. I'm Deborah J. Smith, and yeah,
Love
hope I
it.
was
Yeah, yeah. All of it will be linked in the show notes, friends. So Deborah, one more time, just thank you so much for serving us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. God bless you.
And thank you, friend, for listening. Until next time, peace.
Bye-bye.
Deborah, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your heart, and your faith as this week's Live It Out story. Your faith has been tested, to be sure, but it has created in you a tender heart that is content in being dependent on the strength the Lord provides in abundance. Oh, that our seasons of testing would do the same for us. Our verse again this week is James 1:3. In the NIV, it says, "Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And if you haven't yet, I encourage you to listen to Monday's Take It In episode where I focus on the word testing. Next week is going to be an incredible week that I have been excited to share with you for a long time now. It's finally here. Our Take It In verse will be my verse for the year, 2 Chronicles 20:17a, that reminds me to stand still and watch the victory of the Lord on my behalf. Matt will be my co-host on Monday for our Take It In episode. And Wednesday's episode will be number 200. What? To celebrate, I've put together an episode of highlights looking back over some of the many conversations I've had. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe or follow the podcast on whatever directory you're using to listen. It only takes a second and it guarantees you'll see new episodes as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.